Shakespeare and the Bible. Obviously, Shakespeare is, very, very central to this period that we're talking about. So we mentioned him a little bit before in terms of, Catholic and Protestant ways of thinking and so on. But specifically in relationship to the Bible, just let's message up to a point, but here's the way Hannibal Hamlin puts it. Imagine you've got a television program that everyone is watching every week, sometimes more than once, for their entire lives. And they've seen some episodes dozens and dozens of times. Suppose your parents and grandparents had all watched the same episodes, and suppose further that millions of people in neighbouring countries had watched these episodes too, dubbed into their own languages. Suppose people had actually been watching this show in still other languages for over 1,000 years, and that vast libraries had accumulated over the centuries full of books about how best to interpret the show. Suppose that it was illegal not to watch this show. And moreover, that your eternal salvation depended on it, whether you'd go to heaven or hell after you died. Suppose that this TV show was the basis for your country's literature and art, its political theory, its history, its philosophy, its understanding of the natural world as well as of human nature, and essential to most other fields of knowledge as well. Well, in 16th and 17th century England, the Bible was that show. That's the way it was. It was always in reruns. It never went off the air. So in this course that I'm giving, I've sort of slightly changed the balance of it since I first thought about it. I'm giving a bit more weight to this 16th and 17th century period because I think after that the Bible becomes more secondary in literature and more secondary in culture. This is the time when it's really, really powerful. So, just think about it like that, okay? All right? All the time. That's it. That's what you get, all right? Turn on the television, you get the Bible. Turn on the radio, you get the Bible. Pick up the telephone, it's the Bible, okay? Go to the library, and, it's the Bible, okay? Bible's here, books about the Bible there, more books about the Bible, more Bibles, more books about the Bible. And there's just a little bit of other stuff. And among that other stuff is Shakespeare. Okay, and I think you need to understand that, Shakespeare was just one of hundreds and hundreds of dramatists. There are so many plays from that period that don't even survive. We just know the titles of them. This was a time when, Shakespeare's plays were like Hollywood. Okay. There are some of those early Hollywood movies. We don't have copies of them anymore. They've gone. Well, in the same way, the drama was like the kind of Hollywood of the 16th and 17th centuries. Okay, so it was just a small part. In fact, it was just a part of the other stuff because there was poetry and there was other stuff going on that wasn't connected with religion. But the vast majority of stuff was on the Bible, and so Shakespeare is in a way, just a sort of small minority of what's going on. Hugely popular, okay, very, very successful even in his own lifetime, but just a sort of fairly small part of what's going on. So, context, we're naturally going to suppose that, just like everybody else, Shakespeare knew the Bible, and that he knew that his readers would know it. It was a common framework of reference, a common culture. And so it would be the starting point for, everything really, discussion of philosophy, questions of morality and ethics and the codes of behavior that people had. The whole of society would kind of be revolving around this Bible, which, remember, 100 years previously, people had been forbidden to have access to. All right, so it's a part of the reason why it was so big. It's like, they've kept this secret from us for over 1,000 years. Let's find out what it's all really about. So it was very, very central. And because it was so central, it's not really surprising, perhaps, that Shakespeare makes, at least 1,000 and perhaps a couple of thousand references to the Bible. It depends, some things are so common that they've passed into the language from the Bible. So we couldn't exactly say if he's referring to the Bible or it's just become an everyday expression, some of it. He is perhaps unusual in the sense that other dramatists of the time tend not to make so many references to the Bible as Shakespeare does. He is perhaps, I don't know if there are other playwrights and dramatists and writers who are not specifically religious who made as many references to the Bible as Shakespeare does, but he's pretty high up on the list for making a lot of references to the Bible and using the Bible quite frequently in his work. I'm going to be using the Geneva Bible, not the King James Version today, because this will be the version that Shakespeare refers to. The King James Version, of course, didn't actually come out until 1611, which was like he'd done most of his writing by then. He died not just a few years after that. So the Geneva Bible was the one that he most frequently refers to. And you can see that his quotations come directly from the Geneva Bible. Just as an example, the comedy Measure for Measure. Okay, I could pick, as I say, I've got about 2,000 examples I could pick from, at least 1,000 good ones, and another 1,000 that are a bit more iffy. But the theme and the title of Measure for Measure come from the following passage in the Gospels. For with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged. And with what measure you meet meaning measure in this case, with what measure you meet or give out, to give out, to meet, to give out, it shall be measured unto you again. So you'll get back what you give. Okay? If you're strict with others, God will be strict with you. If you judge, okay, in the King James Version, it's more famous like, judge not lest ye shall be judged. Don't judge in case you become judged. All right? But with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged. Okay? So the judgment you give out to others, that's the judgment that's going to come back on you. That's going to come back and hit you back. Okay? So measure for measure is, directly taken from that. You've got Isabella in Measure for Measure. Her brother Claudio is condemned to be put to death. And she reminds the audience of the biblical teaching that Christ died to save mankind. It becomes a central theme of the play. Why? All the souls that were forfeit once. All the souls that were, everybody who ever was lost once. Because the biblical teaching is that they all had to go to hell until Christ came along and saved them. Okay, all kinds of different, people who try to understand what does that mean? Does that mean that before Jesus everybody went to hell? Or did it mean that they went to hell and then they got out of hell when Jesus came along? Or was there some other arrangement? Okay, different people will argue different positions about that. But the point is that, until Christ came along, theologically, according to the Christian belief, according to the Bible, everybody was lost. Okay, all the souls that were forfeit once, to be lost. And so she goes on to explain the doctrine of grace, God's mercy, without which, according to the Bible, no one could be saved. If God didn't have mercy on us, we would all be equally lost. This is very much the kind of Protestant way of understanding it, a kind of Calvinist belief. How would you be if he, which is the top of judgment, should but judge you as you are? Oh, think on that. And mercy then will breathe within your lips. You become kind when you think, suppose I get judged exactly for what I am. And this is said with the kind of certain knowledge that we are all well, weak or sinful or lacking in some way. Right? That's the kind of confidence behind that, and that's what the Calvinists particularly believed. And during that later part of Queen Elizabeth's reign, it was Calvin, perhaps more than Luther, who was influeing the kind of theology of the Church of England at that time. And so, God doesn't just judge us as we are. God has mercy on us and says, even though you are just a weak, miserable human being, I have mercy on you because that's, I'm God and I forgive. That's what I do. You can find this theme in other plays of Hamlet, of Shakespeare, and notably it comes into Hamlet, the idea that in themselves humans are worthless, humans are undeserving, but they're saved because of God's mercy. And that comes into Hamlet, for example. Use every man after his desert, and who shall escape whipping, he says. Because Rosencrantz and Guildenstern have come to visit him, his friends from university, and he tells the palace people, to please look after my friends, treat them nicely, and the answer is, well, we'll treat them according to their deserts. We'll treat them as they deserve. So you have to do better than that. If you treat everybody as they deserve, we're all going to get whipped, okay? Because we don't deserve anything, and that's a basic part of Protestant theology, that in ourselves we don't deserve anything. It's not just Protestant, because you find it in Catholic thinking as well. I as a human being, okay, St. Paul says, it's not me, it's God inside me that gives me value. Without God inside me, I'm just an empty shell, I'm nothing. And that's the sort of thing that you get in Catholic Christianity as well as in Protestant, but the Protestants really put a strong emphasis on it, that we are miserable sinners, we have no hope at all unless God is going to be merciful towards us. So, use every man after his desert, and who shall escape whipping? And that leads him on to the theme of predestination, the one that we've, that it's a kind of connected idea, that our destiny has already been determined for good or for ill, and our fate is not to choose it, but to prepare for it. We have to prepare for the fate that's going to come and meet us. So, if it be now, it is not to come. If it be to come, it is not now, which is, again, biblical. So, you get... where do you get it? The idea that the readiness is all, okay? In Matthew, no one knows the day or hour in the Gospel of Matthew. That of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. I mean, God knows, God's got it all worked out, and God knows what's happening, but all we can do is just be ready for it when it comes. All right, so that's a biblical reference, and his audience would know. Oh yes, he's talking about that idea in the Bible, that we have to be ready for it, because we don't know, when we're going to die. We don't know when it's going to come. We just have to be ready for it when it happens. So the idea that humanity's saved because of the mercy of God is connected with that idea of predestination and with that idea of providentialism. Providentialism is the idea that God is looking over all his creation, not just looking over humans, but looking over all of nature. Kind of everything that happens, okay, God knows about it all, okay? If there's a speck of dust under this table, God already knows about it, okay? If there's anything at all going on anywhere, okay? And again, that's a biblical idea. It's also from Matthew. he says, are not two sparrows sold for a farthing? A farthing is a quarter of a penny. When I was a little boy, they still had farthings. It would be worth, I don't know, a lot less than 1 yen. Okay, you wouldn't buy anything with it now. Are not two sparrows sold for a farthing, and one of them shall fall on the ground without your Father? Okay, God knows, and God guides, and God allows everything that happens. You know, it's there. If that little speck of dust is there, it's because God let it be there. Okay, your Father, God, you know, according to Matthew in the Bible, is guiding all of these things, and these things are happening. You know, everything that happens is under the guidance of God. Okay, so Hamlet says exactly the same thing, or pretty much the same thing. He says there's a special providence in the fall of a sparrow. So he refers to providentialism. He refers to the fall of a sparrow. He brings that into, you know, the action and the idea of Hamlet. Okay, so he's working very, very closely in his plays with, you know, biblical texts, because Hamlet is all about, you know, should I take revenge and do it? And if I do, is that what God wants me to do, or is it the wrong thing to do? And so he brings all these religious debates into his revenge tragedy. Okay, that's what he does. All right, and he does it in his comedy, in Measure for Measure. He does it in his tragedy here in Hamlet. He does it pretty much all the way through his plays.